would you automatically revaccinate or give a booster to your dog automatically every year after year?
Absolutely not. And I didn't for my clients. So if generally they're going to finish their puppy vaccines at about 4 months of age. So
Mhm.
1 year later, when they're 16 months old, that's when you're going to get that card in the mail that says, hey, he's due for all this stuff again. And that's when you get to say, I'd like a titer, please. I'd like to see what he needs and whether he needs it. Um, and if it comes back as being protected, there's no need to give them another vaccine.
Yeah.
Now, it is up to the pet owner to decide how often they need to do that titer. Most of our clients were doing it once a year because they needed proof for boarding, grooming, daycare.
Mhm.
If you don't need proof for this is why I quit doing my guys. I don't need proof for anything. I know where they are and what their exposure is. But if you need proof, for instance, some veterinarians will not see your pet if it's not up to date on vaccinations, particularly rabies, which makes me really crazy.
Yep.
They're willing to see your pet to come in to get the rabies so that they can be seen. A little bit
Yep.
nuts.
I know.
So somebody said, what do I tell my veterinarian who sends me this card and is saying to me every year, you're overdue for your yearly vaccines, including rabies, canine distemper combo, bordetella, Lyme. That's when you get to say to them, let's talk about my dog's lifestyle. My dog does not go to boarding, grooming, daycare. I really don't need kennel cough for my dog. I've never pulled a tick off my dog. I talked to somebody yesterday. They've had Lyme vaccine every year, and the dog has been on oral flea and tick preventative its entire life. They've never found a tick on their dog. Those oral preventatives do not repel ticks.
Right.
They just don't walk their dog where there's ticks, yet this dog is getting vaccinated every year. Have a conversation about lifestyle. Hey, my dog walks on the street in my neighborhood. We don't have wildlife. We don't have rats. We don't have standing water. The chances of my dog getting lepto are nil. So you can just take that one off the list. I've never pulled a tick. Not going to get Lyme. Take that one off the list. Rabies? Well, let's see. Has it been 3 years? Because if it hasn't been, except for the first one is a 1 year. After
Right.
that, they're a 3-year vaccine. Do not let your vet talk you into, you have to give rabies every year. No, you don't. It's a 3-year vaccine. So, don't fall for that. Distemper and parvo, we know, and it even says it on, and here's something that these clients can use when you're going into your talk to your veterinarian on AVMA, which is the American Veterinary Medical Association,
Mhm.
and AHA, the American Animal Hospital Association. If you go to those websites and you put in the search bar vaccines, it will state on there that the core vaccines, distemper, hepatitis, and parvo, should be given no more often than every 3 to 5 years. It's really more like 5 to 7. It says it right on our parent organization.
Yep.
So veterinarians who are insisting on yearly vaccines for the core vaccines that we know last so much longer, they're not even following the rules of their own association.
We actually linked that. So on the the vaccine guide that we wrote, we linked that on there. So under the resource section, you guys can take that, print it out, click on the link. And we also put, because you mentioned science before, and Dr. Schultz, immunologist, all of that is linked there for you as well, so that you can take all of these resources and show your veterinarian. Because I think a lot of it, I don't think that there's malintention, right? I think they just don't know.
Part of it is not even that they want to vaccinate every year. They want to get you in the
In the
office every
office,
year for an exam. Yes, your
which you
pet
should be.
should be going
Yes.
in every year for an exam. Absolutely 100%. They should be going in for an exam. And while they're there, have lumps and bumps checked and have their abdomen palpated and have their heart listened to.
Dental.
Yeah, get their teeth looked at. So, and when your veterinarian makes recommendations for lab work, that is preventative medicine. That is for the health of your pet. I would much rather go in and spend $300 getting complete lab work done than spend $300 getting a bunch of needles poked into my dog that he doesn't need.
Yeah. So we talked about core vaccines, we talked about non-core vaccines. With the non-core vaccines, it's really lifestyle dependent, but even still, like, for example, I don't do yeah, we don't do any of the non-core, but I don't go to I don't go to dog parks when they're populated, but when they're empty, we have one near us, for example, that's empty in the morning. I'll take my dogs there and have had no issues. So again, that's more lifestyle. But then after all the initial rounds of vaccines and the rabies required by law, we can do titer tests, which we've mentioned, but we have not defined, Dr. Judy, what a titer test is. So can you, if I've never heard of a titer test before, can you explain to me what it is?
Yeah, it's actually really simple. It's so think of your immune system as puzzle pieces that go together. So the foreign invader, the parvovirus, so we've all seen pictures of coronavirus, right? It's like this round thing with all these it's a ball with spikes all over it. Well, when the body is exposed to that puzzle piece, the immune system says, I have things that can fight that off. I'm going to make the interlocking puzzle piece. And then it locks together and neutralizes it. So that's how a vaccine works. When we give like a parvo vaccine, we either use a killed vaccine, so it's a killed virus, or a modified live vaccine, which is we took that viral particle or whatever we're vaccinating for, and we modified it. So let's say we cut a couple chunks off it, but it's still got just enough of the puzzle piece left that the body goes, oh, I can make something against that. So we can actually do a blood test and measure the level of the antibodies. So when we're doing parvo, we're measuring how many of these parvo antibodies are available to attack these guys if my dog should be exposed.
Yep.
And so each lab has their own numbers. Some labs would just give you positive or negative. Other labs will say, anything greater than 1 to 4 is fine. Anything greater than 1 to 80 is fine. So if your pet comes back that they have enough circulating antibodies, you don't need to poke them again. You don't need to make them make more. It's sort of like you can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are or you aren't. You can't get more pregnant. So
I love that.
that may be a
Are you
bad
aren't?
analogy, but it's sort of like you already got that. So we don't need more of that.
Yeah.
So it's a simple science. They literally take a blood test, spin it down, send the liquid they take the cells off and send the liquid out to a lab for testing. There actually are even titer tests that can be run in the veterinary hospital. There's one called AccuCheck, I think, or AccuVet. And so they can actually run it right there. So some vet clinics, if they're doing enough of them, they'll do that. We always sent ours out to the lab. Now, part of the problem is depending on which lab they are sending it to, it can cost you an arm and a leg. Some of the labs charge them a fortune, and on the most part, whatever the lab is charging the veterinarian, they're doubling that fee to you. That's how they make their money, and that's to pay for the doctor's interpretation of it and speaking to you and spending their time, and so that's fine. But if we have a lab that's charging $40 to do a titer versus a lab that's charging $200 to do a titer, your titers can be $80 or they can be $400.
Yep.
So if your veterinarians, and a lot of veterinarians will quote a really high price because they don't want to do it. It's so much faster and easier for them to poke a vaccine and run than it is to spend the time to get a blood sample, depending on, how cooperative your pet is, and spinning it and sending it out and having to interpret it. And some of them don't feel comfortable interpreting them, which is kind of silly because the lab tells you it's either good or it's not.
Yeah.
So that's a little silly, but and definitely ask, like if you go in and you say, I'd like to have titers run for distemper and parvo, don't ask for non-core vaccine titers. There are none. They're useless. So it's really for the core vaccines, distemper, parvo, and rabies. And I don't even ask for, we didn't even run adenovirus because if they've ever had an adenovirus, and we just don't see it. So I didn't even care about that one. So the first thing is if you're asking for a titer, ask the price so that you can say yes or no before you get to the front desk. Because when you get to the front desk and you see a line item for $400 and you go, ugh, and then you're too embarrassed to go back and say, I can't do that. And then, you go home and go, oh my God, I can't pay my rent this month because I just spent $400 on a titer and I didn't ask. So always ask, get an estimate, find out, are they in that $90 category or are they in that $400 category? Because it makes a big difference. If their pricing is crazy high, there are places and I think they're in the
They're in the guide.
download.
Yeah.
Um, so there are places where the blood can be sent where it will be a lot less expensive. However, you are going to have to get the blood draw. So while you're there, say, well, how much would you charge me? Like, I don't want to pay $600 for that titer. How much would you charge me to take a blood sample, spin it down, and hand it to me? I'll send it in myself. And that's fine. I mean, they can charge a reasonable fee. That's you have to pay them for their time and their expertise and their equipment and their staff that is going to have to do that for you. Fine, pay that fee and then send it somewhere, or give them the resource and say, "Would you send it here for me because it's going to cost less?"
And that is all linked in the guide where there's a printout that you can show your vet that actually talks to them about how, I think it's from Protect the Pets, that will talk about how they can start doing in-house more affordable titer testing. But I think to summarize, the good news is because titer testing is becoming more mainstream, there's more and more affordable options out there. Because I know that was big just 2 years ago. I remember talking about titer testing and that being the number one objection is like, I can't afford that because it would be $300, $400, $500 to do that. But when we're vaccinating our dogs, we kind of think we're giving them immunization, like, but the vaccination does not equal immunization. And so what's happening is we kind of have two options. We have three. One, we can do nothing in terms of revaccinating. Two, we can just revaccinate and give boosters every single year and hope it works and hope that our dog doesn't have any reactions. Or three, which you just talked about, titer tests, which can actually help identify if they have immunity towards that disease. And as you said before, I think this is so key that you could give the core vaccine one, maybe twice after the second round, and they could have immunity and antibodies the rest of their life, or at least for several years. And I think
Yeah.
it's really powerful that instead of just automatically revaccinating every year, we can just titer test.
Yeah.
And I do want to say that I put this in the guide. According to AHA, this is a direct quote, which is American Animal Hospital Association, says, direct quote, measuring antibody levels provides a reasonable assessment of protective immunity. And this is something you can show to your conventional veterinarian if they're like on the fence, like, oh, well, antibodies aren't conclusive, et cetera. Nothing is 100% in my opinion, right? Like there's always
Right.
risks for everything,
So
but
somebody asked a good question. They said, if a titer is low and says that the pet requires a vaccine,
mm,
do you have to give a secondary shot to be immune? So
good
here's a
question.
really interesting thing. If your dog is over 6 months old and you need to give a booster of anything, or let's say you adopt a dog and you don't know the immune status and you can't get a titer, don't want to spend money on a titer, they only need one shot. One will do it. Their immune system is mature. They need one. So let's say the parvo titer came back low
Mhm.
and your vet says, well, they have to get a parvo vaccine. They only need one. You do not have to do one and then repeat it 3 to 4 weeks later, just one. If your pet has lapsed, so we see this a lot, like you got your series of 2 leptos or you got your series of 2 Lyme vaccines, and now it's been like 3 or 4 years, and for whatever reason you decide our lifestyle's changed, I want to get a lepto and a Lyme booster for my dog. First of all, separate them, don't do them at the same time, but you only need one. You don't have to redo the 2 series again. Part of the reason for that is the body has immune memory. And this is something that we can't measure, unfortunately, the immune memory. So we can measure antibodies, that's the circulating antibodies. What we can't measure is what lies within the cells. And so let's say your dog has a low parvo titer and then he gets exposed to parvo and you haven't done anything. He may, because he at one point knew what parvo was, his body may wake up and release from those cells enough antibodies to take care of the problem. And things like parvo are really, it's really a disease of puppies and really extremely immune compromised animals. Once they're adults, most of them just develop enough natural immunity and ability to fight it off. Um, so parvo really came to the forefront in the early 1980s, and I graduated from veterinary school in 1984. So my junior and senior year of veterinary school, we had wards full of parvo dogs, wards, and it was all puppies. Wards full of puppies, and that's what we see. And so before the parvo vaccine was available and before we were routinely vaccinating for parvo, it was a lot more rampant. And there are certain breeds that are much more prone to parvo and may need a later vaccine, like at 20 weeks. And those are the Dobermans, the Rottweilers, Pit Bulls. We don't know why, but they just seem to be much more susceptible. And we opened a new clinic in a um, fairly economically challenged town in southern New Jersey, and a lot of the animals weren't getting any veterinary care at all. So
Mm.
parvo vaccine was not being given, and during the summer months, because that's when these viruses are more rampant, we would see at least one litter of puppies, usually Rottweilers, every week with parvo.
Hmm.
And so it used to be a huge problem. And once we got into that community and, really raised the level of care, the level of nutrition, how really educating the clients, we saw very little, very little. And really, it was a matter of even just getting the mama dog to have good immunity so that she passed something on to the puppies.
Yeah. And that's, this entire conversation, I love learning from you and talking with you about this because you're not so extreme on either end that you're like, oh, we can never give any vaccine ever, right? Like you acknowledge and you educate that there are risks. Like dogs can get ill from these things.